Hi everyone, and welcome to part 5 on how to create weapon skins for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I've been getting a lot of comments over the past 2 years and a lot of questions whether or not I was going to continue my tutorial series, and well, I guess I'm back, and here is part 5. In this part, we are going to take a look at how to create patterns for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So in the last couple of videos, I've mainly been talking about how to create static skins for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which are the custom paint style and the gunsmith finishes. But now we're going to be taking a look at 5 other finishes, which are going to be the patina, anodized airbrushed, anodized multicolored, hydrographic style, and the spray paint style. The first bit of the tutorial will be mainly about the basic of patterns, which can be applied to all of these pattern styles. And afterwards we are going to take a look at how we can use our patterns for the specific paint styles, because every paint style applies the pattern a little bit differently. So first let's get into the basics on how to make a pattern. So as per the usual, we start out in a square image, so like an image that's by the multiplication of 2, which is 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 2, 5, 6, 5, 12, 10, 24, or 2048 by 2048. And this is the maximum size that we can go for currently in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which is 2048 by 2048, so this is also the recommended size that you work with. So how a pattern works is, instead of having a UV sheet that you have to paint in accordingly to like where you want your design to be, a pattern can be applied randomly to the weapon's geometry. And how this is applied differs per finish style, but we'll get into that later. So first, one thing we have to realize when creating a pattern is that the pattern is seamless. And what this means is that anything that goes outside on the right of the pattern comes back on the left. It's kind of like in the old Pac-Man game where you go around and then if you go to the right of the screen you come back on the left. Like, it's supposed to be seamless so that if the pattern is repeated multiple times over the weapon's geometry, there are no visible seams and there's no like weird line running straight through the design that you cannot explain. So to illustrate this a little bit better, here we have a gray square in the middle, which is going to be our pattern, and let's draw something like this, and then maybe a little lining like this, and a line like this, line like this, line like this. Okay, so now we created a pattern, and what the game is going to be doing is the game is going to take this whole square and it's going to repeat it like on the x-axis, the y-axis, and it's going to rotate it around. So if it's not seamless, and we take a look in, for example, Substance Designer to make that clear, we can see that we have our square here, and if we press spacebar, there are noticeable seams, and we want to try to avoid these noticeable seams as much as possible because it kind of breaks your pattern apart, and that's not what you want. So what we can do in order to counter that, let's delete that layer and get the layer back. I'm just going to call it layer 1 in case my Substance Designer doesn't work that way. What we want to do is, let's draw a shape. Let's draw an 8. And if we want this pattern to be repeated, we can, for example, drag it over here, and then the method that I use to transfer it to the other side, which might not be the most optimal way to do it, but that's how I work, is I expand the workspace a little bit. I use the selection tool and select all the way up to the edge of my work field, and I just drag it over to the other side like that until it snaps, and then we're good to go. I deselect it, change it back to 2048, and now if we save this and we open Substance Designer again, we can see it's live updating here, and if we press that, we have a repeating 8 over the edge. So this is important to think about when you're creating your pattern. So that's pretty much literally all there's to pattern creation, so the general knowledge about patterns. Now we're going to take a look into the specific styles that happen per pattern. So we're first starting out with the patina style, which is the most simple application method of a pattern. The reason for this is because you don't have to worry about the channels of your image. So pretty much whatever color you have in your diffuse layer are going to be represented on the gun. It's going to be applied to the weapon, and it's all good. So now that we have our 8 here, let's get a 1 in orange, let's do a 2 in pink, and a 3 in a light blue color. So if we save this, let's save this as tutorial 5, as a target of it tutorial 5. Let's go ahead and import this into our VTF edit, tutorial 5. We haven't created an alpha channel, so we can just set it to DXT1 for now. Let's have that import and save that here as tutorial 5. So now, if we open up Counter-Strike Global Offensive, I'll be right back when it's loaded. So now that we're loaded in Counter-Strike, let's go to our workbench and let's select the finish style patina. So as you can see, when you haven't selected a pattern, the weapon where the pattern will be applied is black. The rest of the pattern, like the rest of the weapon, where the pattern is not applied, has the default material. So in this case for the AK-47, that is the stock, the grip, and the front grip. For other weapons, this might be other regions. That is decided by Valve with their masks, and that's what they decided. So here, for example, in the UMP, it's the main body, the grip, the magazine, front grip, stock. These are all default materials. So when we apply our pattern, it will only be applied to the black area of this gun. So let's choose our pattern here, which is in CSGO Skins 2020 Tutorial 5 for me. Let's open that up. And as we can see, we have our pattern here on different places. If we click on pattern, we can see that we loaded the correct pattern. And if we check our UV chart, we can see that a bit of the 8 is applied on here, a little bit there. I think this was the 2, if I remember correctly. I don't know exactly. But it's applied all over the place. So one thing that we can do to make this easier on ourselves is we can up the pattern skill. And pretty much what the pattern skill does is it's going to tell the game like, hey, you see, this is applied by 1, so that means we have 1 times applied on the x-axis and 1 time applied on the y-axis. If we change that to 3, what we're pretty much telling the game is like, hey, you see this pattern? Apply it 3 times over x and 3 times over y. So that gives you a smaller work field, which is applied over the pattern. And as you can see now, here's the little 3, here's a 2, here's the 1, and the 8 is over there. And this is also represented in here. The nice thing about patina is that it allows you to use any type of color that you want. You can use as many colors, you can have like an extreme color explosion pattern on your skin, and you don't have to worry about restrictions. You are, however, limited to where this pattern is applied. As you could have seen, the pattern is only applied on the black parts of the gun, which is the main body frame in this case. And let's see the SG553, once again, it's only the frame. Another thing, as you can see, is that it's also not seamless, even though our texture is technically seamless. And the reason for that is because of the way that patina is applied to the weapon. You can check the CSGO workshop finish pattern application section. And here you can see, let's have a look, where is it? I think somewhere down here, yeah, the pattern application methods. There are 2 application methods. We'll get to this in a later bit, but pretty much our pattern is applied on top of the existing UV sheet, which means that if the UV sheet of the SSG08, SSG553, if that one is not seamless, so for example here's the 8 that runs down, if it doesn't continue down here onto, for example, this area, it's cut off and it's going to be taking that information somewhere else, which is not where the pattern is continuing. In order to fix this, we can go to a different type of finish, and that would be the spray paint and anodized airbrushed finishes, because they use a second method for applying the pattern, which is a triplanar mapping application method. But before we get into that, I first want to show you something else which is really important when creating other types of finishes than patina, and that is that those patterns work by a paint by channel type application. I'll be right back with you guys. A paint by channel pattern might look difficult at first, but once you understand what's going on, it becomes relatively more simple. So as we can see here, there's this very trippy looking pattern, but what it does is it takes the information from this image and separates that per channel. So here we can see that there is a red channel, here we can see there's a green channel, and here we can see it's a blue channel. And what it does is it combines all this information into one pattern. This is just how every other image is created, but it's just a combination of colors and the values of it. So To make this a bit more easy to understand, I created a little worksheet here in Photoshop. As you can see, there's a 1, a 2, and a 3. A red, green, blue, 1, 2, 3. And if we go into the channels tab here, we can see that if we select red, the red channel, it only shows the 1. And that is because the 1 is the only thing that carries red values in its shape. Same goes for green, it only has green values, and blue only has blue values. So what this essentially does is it allows the game to read this channel and be like, well, I'm going to give this whole structure here, this whole thing, I'm going to give that a different color. Same goes for here and here. So you are painting by these channels. These are the 3 main colors that you can work with, but you can also combine the colors. So here we created a color which is 110 and 110. So 110 of red and 110 of blue, which is a combination of red and blue. So if we draw that 4 in here, and we go into our green channel, we don't see it because there's no green values in there because the green values are set to 0. But if we check red, there are some values, and there's blue, there are some values. So let's save this and import this into game. So now that we're back in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, let's select the anodized multicolored finish here. Let's select the P90 because that's easy because it has a big frame here where we can display our pattern on. Let's go and grab our pattern here from 2020 tutorial 5 v3. So as you can see here, we have 1, 2, 3, and then the 4 doesn't seem to show up. That is because it blends in with the background very well. You can see it very you can see it a little bit, but it's probably going to get ruined because of the YouTube compression. So now what we are doing is we're going to be assigning specific colors to these channels. So color 0 represents black, color 1 represents red, color 2 represents let's see, a full whole green value, and this represents the maximum blue value. And as you can see here, we have a representation of what we created, but then on the weapon skin. And now what a paint by channel system allows us to do is it allows us to make changes to our colors in our pattern simply in the game and no longer having to go back and forth between Photoshop and the game and reloading the texture. Simply, if we want to change this one into an orange one, we select the red channel because it's in the red channel, and we select the orange color and we press OK, and it applies an orange color. Now, the scope of this tutorial for now is going to be mainly focused on the anodized multicolored and the hydrographic pattern styles, because spray paint and anodized airbrush use a different way of applying the pattern, and we're already like 10 minutes into the tutorial, and I don't want this to be like a 20-minute tutorial because that can be very boring. So for now, let's focus on anodized multicolored and hydrographic. So the difference between these two, because if we switch now to hydrographic, we can see that it does exactly the same. It's just that the font is a bit ridiculous, but it does exactly the same thing. The difference between these two has to do with the alpha channel. In the hydrographic alpha channel of the pattern, you are allowed to change the wear values. So if you watch my 3rd tutorial series where we talk about the alpha channel, it's pretty much exactly the same for the hydrographic channel, for the hydrographic pattern thing. So let's say this black background, if we make this all white in the hydrographic channel, it will be completely worn and we won't have a background here anymore. Meanwhile, the anodized multicolored finish allows us to make changes to the Phong exponent and the Phong map of the pattern itself, which means that if we want the 1 to be more reflective than the 4, we can make the 1 very white on the alpha channel and the 4 very black, which means that 1 makes more, like reflects more than 4. So that's pretty much the big difference between the two. Aside from that, there are some differences when it comes to application as well. So let's see, the M249 is probably a good example, I think. So here we can see that in anodized multicolored, the pattern is applied mainly to the main body, and if we select hydrographic, we can see that the pattern is also applied to the ammo box and the front parts of the weapon. And one thing which you might have noticed is that there are parts that are a solid color. And the reason for that is because of the masks that Valve has predetermined for every weapon. These we cannot change, so you have to work with this happening. And pretty much what this is that specific areas of the gun model are automatically assigned a solid color of either color 2, either color 3, or a combination of the both. So in this case for the M249, that's color 3. So if we change this into, let's say, pink, this automatically becomes a solid color of pink. This is something you have to work with. This is something that like makes you be creative with what you have and come up with creative solutions to make this look okay. So let's go to the P90, let's see what's the case here, and here it's the green channel, and it only does this bit. So every gun has it a little bit differently, so you can play around with the values yourself. We have created a very simple pattern right now with literally just no overlapping colors except for the 4, or like not a very difficult pattern, but what one can do, so I'll give you a quick example of what one can do here. Let's go into here. Let's select here the MP5 of this. So as you can see, you can create more complicated patterns this way. So for example, you have this pattern here, and as you can see, there's a flow and everything of like colors. So here's red, but here's like an orange, which is like a mixture between green and red. And here's a mixture between red, green, and blue, and that all creates different colors and shades on your weapon skin. So that's pretty much all there is about these two pattern types. In the next video I will talk a bit more about spray paint and anodized airbrushed, because they are applied in a different way. They are applied through triplanar mapping instead of UV application like this. So without further ado, I hope this tutorial has helped you guys, and I will see you in the next video.